Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing and most respected fields today, and earning your CISSP certification can open the door to some of the highest paying and most trusted roles in the industry. But passing the CISSP isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about understanding how to think like a security leader. That's exactly what this course is designed to do. I will walk you through every domain, simplify complex topics, and share real world examples that will help you not only pass the exam but truly master cybersecurity. So, before we begin, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell. Welcome back to the CISSP course. So today we will go through the domain 2, that is asset security, and this one is a short domain having about 10% weightage in overall CISSP exam content. So let's get started. So these are some of the topics that we will go through, including the information cycle, information classification and protection, information, including information roles, data security controls, asset retention, and asset handling requirements. So our first topic is information and data life cycle. So it is pretty straightforward. We have these 6 steps during information or data life cycle, and these are the collect, store, use, share, chain, and destroy. So in the collect stage, data is generated. This is the first stage where we generate, or you can also say modify or aggregate the data. For example, if I give a simple example, when I was writing notes in the slides, or when I was creating this presentation, I was generating the data. So I generated this data, and now I am here using this data, this presentation, this video. The next step is, once the data is generating, to store it somewhere. So data is saved in a storage system or repository. So in my case, I saved this presentation inside my laptop hard disk drive. Inside the local drive, I could also have saved it inside the Google Drive or inside the cloud. So you need a storage location, save the data once generated in the step 1. Step 3 is, then the data once generated and saved is processed and are analyzed by the user or system. So here I am using this data, that is this presentation in this video, to teach you this course. So I am the user. This is the data that I generated in step 1, then stored it in step 2 inside my laptop, and in step 3 I am using here during recording of this video. The next step, step 4, is to share. We sometimes then share the data. So data is shared with authorized external user or system. For example, I can now share these PPT slides with you people inside this video in my video description. So if you like to have these PPT presentation, please ask me in the comment. I will happy to oblige and share it. And then the 5th step is retain. So data is kept or retained or archived for a predefined period of time. So since this is my personal data, my personal PPT, I have no constraint or no obligation to retain this data for specific period of time. However, I can retain it. Archival is done in a storage, you can say a cold storage, which is not accessed frequently. So once I am done with this video recording, I am done with the presentation, I can archive this data inside my external hard drive, which I access or use frequently, so that I can free up the space in my laptop, which I use frequently for other tasks as well. And the last step is to destroy the data. So data is deleted and permanently removed from storage. making it inaccessible and unusable. So once this data is no longer required, I no longer need it, I can then permanently delete it. So since this data is not a very sensitive or confidential data, I can delete it with simply delete command, but practically inside organization, the data stored in storage is confidential data, maybe private data, maybe the data may be PII or PHI data. So these data then required specific destruction techniques so that it is not accessible and not usable by any unauthorized third party. So our next topic is information classification and protection. So first we need to classify the information, and then according to that classification we protect the information. So the purpose of classification is that it ensures data receives protection based on its value, sensitivity, and impact if compromised. So what does this mean? This means that let's suppose if a data is of less sensitivity, let's suppose it is, we can say, unclassified data. So we don't need to employ very strong protection, because the protection and security controls, they are not cheap. They cost the organization. So first we need to determine the value and sensitivity of data based on its classification, and then accordingly we need to apply the protection so that a very high sensitive data gets more protection, and less sensitive data of low value and data that have less impact get the protection and security controls accordingly. So this helps security controls. We apply security controls accordingly based on data value, sensitivity, and impact. Access permission, similarly, we apply the access permission as per the classification, as well as handling procedures. Handling procedure, as we studied in the last slide, let's suppose we are storing the data. So very high sensitive data, we will encrypt the data and then store it. Similarly, as we studied, the last step was destruction. For less sensitive data, such as this presentation, I will simply delete it. But for high sensitive data, I won't simply delete it. I will destroy the hard drive so that it is inaccessible. Classification criteria. So what are some of the criteria that we need to keep in mind when classifying the data? And these include, number one is data age. So older data may lose sensitivity or value over time, and classification may change as data becomes outdated or less relevant. So you must have seen this one example that comes into my mind, that recently the US President Donald J. Trump just declassified the JFK, John F. Kennedy assassination files. So they were very important, relevant, and sensitive at that time, when that event or incident happened. But over time, its sensitivity and value decreased. So they are declassified. In US, I think there is some specific time, maybe I think 50 years or something, where the classified data can then be declassified. So the data age, basically, the lesser the age, the more sensitive is data, the more sensitive and value the data has, and as the data gets older, its age increases, its value and its sensitivity decreases. Next is, of course, the value. So the importance of data to the organization, financial operation, or strategic affects its classification. So this is the most important one. So the more value the data has to the organization, to its business, the more higher classification level the data will get. If the data is of very high level, let's suppose of very sensitive nature and very impactful data, for example, it is of high value to the national security, the highest that classification that data can get is the top secret. For example, you can say the nuclear codes or nuclear assets, they may get this classification. Next is the damage impact. So this is the potential harm to the organization if the data is lost, altered, or disclosed. For example, reputational, financial, or operational damage. So again, this is related to value. So if the data is, let's suppose, lost or disclosed, what impact it would have on the organization, reputation, financial damage, or its operational day-to-day business operational damage. So the higher the damage, higher will be the classification of data, and if the damage is less, the classification may be kept low. Next thing is the legal and regulatory requirements. So certain data must be protected according to laws or regulations such as GDPR, HIPAA, which influences its classification. For example, if there is specific data, for example, in US, the PHI data or patient health information must be kept confidential or secret according to this law. It is obligated through this law that the PHI data is kept confidential and undisclosed. Similarly, in EU, GDPR is EU as we studied, EU law as we studied in our first domain. So in EU, the citizens' private data or PII. PII data must be kept confidential and should not be disclosed to unauthorized users and organization. And the last criteria is the access and copy. So the number of people who can access or duplicate the data, the more accessible or easily copied it is, the higher the risk, potentially requiring stricter classification. So this one, what does the number 5 tells us? So the number of people who can access or duplicate the data, the more accessible or easily copied it is, the higher the risk, potentially requiring stricter classification. So if the data is easily accessible and it can be copied by many people or it can be easily copied, then the potential risk of its disclosure is higher. Therefore, such data should get higher classification so that its disclosure or its handling is done accordingly. So, access and copying of data also impacts the classification of data. The easily the data can be copied or accessed, the more stricter classification should get so that it is not closed easily. So now coming over to some classifications inside the government as well as military. So these classifications are mostly used in government agencies, particularly military, and the classifications include this is the highest classification: top secret, then secret, confidential, and unclassified. So the top secret is the highest classification in government or military classification, and unauthorized disclosure of top secret data could cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. As we studied, for example, if the nuclear codes or nuclear allocation of the nuclear assets is disclosed, it will pose a very exceptionally grave damage to the national security. Number 2 is the secret. So exposure of secret data could cause serious damage to national security. So we are going down from exceptionally grave damage to serious damage. Third is the confidential. So disclosure could cause damage to national security. So it could cause damage but not serious or grave damage. And last is the unclassified. So that is information that does not require protection for national security reasons. So these are, you can say, unclassified or public. So now coming over to commercial classifications, and the commercial classification include confidential, sensitive, private, proprietary, and public. So we are coming from higher sensitive classification to lower classification from confidential to public. So confidential is the highest level and disclosure could cause serious harms. So previously we were talking about government and its agency. Now we are talking about private organizations as well as you can also say private parties and individuals that use these classification commercially. So confidential is the highest level and disclosure could cause serious harm to the organization, reputation, financial as well as operational damage. Next is the sensitive. So sensitive is important data and exposure may hurt reputation of the organization. Third is private. So it is internal information that must be kept private and this information, private information should stay within the organization. As the name indicates, it's private, so it should stay private. And fourth is the proprietary. So this is proprietary information is shared limited with external party or limited external sharing, and its loss reduces competitiveness. So if this type of data is disclosed, the organization may lose some competitiveness, but no reputational or you can say other damages. And the last one is the public. So this information is openly available and no harm is done if this information is disclosed. Since this is already this information is openly or publicly available. For example, an organization or commercially available, you can say website where all the info regarding the organization is openly shared for the public consumption. Now coming over to a very important slide, that is information ownership and data roles. So these are different roles that we will study. We will study their definition, and then I have given the example of each of these one, taking a banking scenario, that how in a banking scenario we can correlate these different roles. So first one is the data owner. So data owner basically defines or decides how and why data is used and ensures it is protected, ultimately accountable for it. So remember, data owner is always the highest management, such as here we can see it is the CISO. It can also be the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or Chief Information Security Officer. So what is an example of data owner in a banking scenario? So the Chief Information Security Officer or CISO or Head of Compliance acts as the data owner for the customer account data. They set policies on access control, data retention, and encryption standards. So remember, this is one example for the banking scenario. For any other organization or any other example, the data owner may either be the CISO or CEO, but it is the point to remember is that it should be the highest, someone in the highest management. Next is the data controller. So data controller basically determines the purpose and means of processing personal data and ensures compliance with regulation. So in our example, the bank itself is the data controller. It decides that customer data will be collected and processed to open accounts, process transactions, and meet regulatory requirements. So inside banking, the bank itself is the data controller, since the bank collects the data and then processes it. Third one is the data custodian. So data custodian basically manages and safeguards the data on IT system. So now we are going more specific towards the IT system according to the policies defined by the data owner. So policy, as we already studied in our domain, one policy is the higher level document from the management. So management defines the policies and these policies are then acted upon by the other employees such as data custodian. So the bank's IT department So remember, the custodian are the IT guys that manages the data inside IT systems, such as you can say the database administrator, the network admin. These are our data custodian. So the bank's IT department ensures that databases storing customer information are encrypted, regularly backed up, and access is logged and monitored. Next one is the data processor. So data processor basically processes or handles data on behalf of the controller without owning it. So data controller were basically responsible for processing the personal data, but data controller can also outsource the data to the data processor, and then the processor processes or handle data on behalf of the data controller without owning it. So data processor does not own the data, it simply processes it on behalf of the controller. So data controller in our banking scenario example is a data processor in our example is a third party, maybe a third party payment processor like a credit card clearing service that handles transaction data on behalf of the bank but does not actually own the data. Next one is the data user. The user basically accesses and uses the data to perform authorized business tasks on the data. And what is an example of data user in our banking example? So a bank teller or customer service agent accesses a customer's account detail to process a withdrawal or update contact information. So for example, if a customer comes to the bank, wants a withdrawal, the person to which he goes is basically the data user, because that person uses the customer data to perform that specific action. So a data user is the one that accesses and uses data to perform authorized business tasks on the data. And last one is the data subject. So these are the individual whose personal data is collected, processed, or stored. And these are the customers in our example who opens a bank account and provides personal information details like name, ID, and financial information. So I hope this makes sense. This slide is very important. You should know all these data roles. What does they mean? And you should also understand their purpose through this example so that you can correlate them in any organization or any example. So our next topic is data security controls. Security controls at different data states. So data can be at different states. For example, data at rest, data in process, and data in transit. What are some common security controls that are applied at data during its different states or stages? And we will also give an example for each. So the first one is the data at rest. So at rest, data is stored on a device, drive, or server. So in this state, data is not actively being used or transmitted. Data is simply stored or archived. And what are some common security controls during data at rest? So these are basically file system encryption. This one is, I think, used inside Windows or Linux. I don't fully remember. Full disk encryption. Full disk encryption, we can give an example in Windows, the BitLocker. So BitLocker is example of full disk encryption. BitLocker let you encrypt your whole drive inside Windows. And similarly, trusted platform module or TPM chip can also be used to encrypt your data at rest. For example, a bank encrypts customer account data that is stored on its database using EFS, that is uh, a file encryption system or encryption file system, and secure encryption keys with TPM. So TPM is used basically to generate the encryption keys and store the encryption keys, and is a tamper-proof chip inside the system, mainly inside the laptops and PCs. We will study about TPM in detail in our upcoming domains. The next state or stage of data is the data in process, where data is actively being used or processed in memory by application. So this one is the most common method and also difficult to secure because data is actively being used. So how do we secure data during its processing? And some common security control include memory encryption. So by memory, we mean when the data is processed, it is memory, such as by memory, we mean RAM. Secure enclaves. So there are secure enclaves inside memory where we can securely process the data. Access controls, application sandboxing. So these are some of the security controls for data that is actually being processed. An example of this, our banking scenario, is when a banking application calculates loan interest, data is temporarily decrypted in memory and protected by secure enclave encryption and restricted process permission. Third and the last one is the data in transit, where data is moving between systems or network. So when you are watching this video, data is in transit because the video is being transmitted, you can say, from YouTube server to your location or to your device. So the data is actively in transit. And when you open YouTube, www.youtube.com, you can see that at the start it is HTTPS. So this HTTPS is basically for security control of that data during transit. And so the security control during transit are SSL/TLS, which is transport layer security. Previously it was SSL. Nowadays the latest standard is TLS. VPN, which is virtual private network. IPsec is also VPN for layer 3 IP security. And HTTPS, as I said, for browsing the web, we use the HTTPS, which secure our data and encrypts it during transit. So when a customer accesses their online banking portal, the data between the browser and the bank server is protected using TLS encryption over HTTPS. So our next topic is what are some threats to the data storage. So when data is stored or data is at rest, what are some threats to that data? So we will study these threats, study their description, and then we will study some controls or mitigation of these threats. The first one is the unauthorized access to that stored data, and it means unapproved access to sensitive data or unauthorized access to sensitive data. So how can we control unauthorized access to sensitive data? We can do it through strong authentication, through encryption. So strong authentication, you can say, let's suppose MFA, multi-factor authentication. It is strong authentication. Encryption is if your data at rest is encrypted, as we studied, even if someone accesses it unauthorizedly, it will still be encrypted and won't be of any use to that user or system because it is encrypted. Anonymization means to remove the sensitive part of data and make it anonymous. For example, if we have, let's suppose, a customer account data, we can remove all the account information and only disclose, let's suppose, few digits. For example, last 3 digit or last 4 digit. Tokenization is a similar concept. So we will study anonymization, tokenization, masking, all these in detail laterly. But for now, for example, you can, for a whole credit card number, you can generate just a token and use it. For example, 234 may be a token number for a specific credit card number. Masking is, as I already said, by masking all the digits of credit card and revealing only few digits so that the it is recognizable that this belongs to this customer but the whole number is not visible. And layered defense. So you need to deploy layer defense. Layer defense means that you have multiple control, so that if one is compromised, you have another control at work. The next threat to our data storage or data at rest is liability or non-compliance. So this is failing to meet legal or regulatory obligations. So the data, some sensitive data such as we studied the PII is governed by GDPR in EU or PHI is governed by HIPAA in US. So these should be keep in mind. And how do we comply with these regulations? We can do this through due care, by taking due care, due diligence, SLAs with the third party. So if our data is with third party, let's suppose with cloud provider, we can sign SLAs, service level agreements with that cloud provider, so that our data is taken care of according to the applied rules and regulation. Next threat is the denial of service attack and distributed denial of service attack. During these attacks, the system is overloaded with the flood of traffic, which causes downtime to the legitimate users. And how we can mitigate this, or what are some of the controls against these attacks? So these are, as we studied in our domain 1, redundancy. Redundancy means that you have, let's suppose, multiple redundant server, so that even if one server is knocked out by the DOS or DDoS attack, user can be routed to other available server, and the server services are not affected to the end user. Data dispersion. So data dispersion means that data is not located at a single location. So data may be dispersed at multiple cloud location, so that if it is unavailable at one location, it is being processed or made available to user from the second geographically dispersed location. And network protection. We can protect the data through network devices such as firewalls, load balancers, etc. Our next threat is the data corruption or destruction. So these are the threats against the data integrity. So this is the loss. Destruction is the loss of data, complete loss, and corruption is the alteration of stored data. And what are some controls and mitigation against these threats? So hashing, as we already studied, is used to preserve the integrity of data. Similarly, digital signatures are also used to preserve the authenticity and integrity of data. TPM, anti-malware, and proper data sanitization, these all are used for proper destruction as well as for data integrity. Next is the data leakage or data breaches. So these are unauthorized data disclosure, and controls and mitigation against these threats are access controls, again encryption. So even if the data is leaked or breached, data is encrypted and would make no sense to the malicious actor that disclose the data or to any user. And also monitoring. So data is continually monitored so that it does not leave the organization. And one such procedure or application for this purpose is DLP, which is data leakage or data loss prevention, which continuously monitors the data and checks whenever data leaves the organization, it is prevented, or it is the user or the administrator is notified about such incident. And last threat to the data at rest or storage data is the accidental media loss. So media is the storage media or the storage infrastructure that houses the data. So it is the physical loss of storage devices such as storage drives or storage servers. So What should we do to mitigate such occurrence or such threat? Again, encrypted. So as we can see, we have encryption almost in most of these mitigation and control, because as we studied for data at rest or data storage, encryption is the most obvious or strong control. Then secure handling and transport of uh, physical media to prevent its loss. So as I said about the DLP, that data loss prevention. So what is DLP? So first of all, the definition. So DLP or data loss prevention includes controls to ensure sensitive data, for example, social security number, account numbers, and other sensitive information stays within the organization according to the policies and standards. What is the function of DLP? So it detects and then prevents unauthorized transfer or exfiltration of sensitive data. So first of all, when DLP is deployed, it first of all it is configured and data is fed inside the DLP. For example, the social security number has specific, let's suppose, format. It is given that format, that whenever this format data is this type of format, the data of this format leaves the organization, it should be prevented. So its function is, so first of all, it scans the organization, all the storages and available servers and devices to discover such data, and when this data, whenever it leaves the organization, it prevents it or it rings the alarm. Next is the compliance. So the DLP basically helps organization meet regulatory requirements such as HIPAA and PCI DSS and other data protection law. The PCI DSS is the Payment Card Industry and Data Security Standard. So our next topic is data masking, obfuscation, anonymization, and tokenization. So what are these terms and how they help us securing our confidential data? So let's go through it one by one. So obfuscation is hiding or altering sensitive data to make it unclear. An example is replacing real names in database with random codes. So obfuscation is basically a generic and broad term, and all the remaining three are, you can say, examples of the obfuscation. So masking is hiding part of the data using symbols or placeholder. An example of masking is showing this number by hiding or masking the initial digits, such as these replaced by XXX, and showing the last four or last three digit instead of the full social security number. Similarly, same can be done for the credit card numbers. Remember, when you call the banking customer service regarding some query about your credit card or your debit card, and they ask you the last four digit of your credit card or debit card number, it is because they themselves are not able to view the whole number. For security reason and for your privacy, they are able to see the last four digit, and that's why they also confirm these numbers from you. So masking is to mask some part of the private data and showing the rest, so that you can make sense of the data, but similarly not disclose the whole data. Next is the data anonymization, and it is removing or encrypting personal details so individuals cannot be identified. So as the name indicates, anonymization is making peoples or individuals anonymous. So if you have PII data, you can make this data anonymous by removing the personal details such as their numbers, their phone numbers, email numbers, etc., and replacing these names and other details with generic IDs for research data. For example, if we have let's suppose John Smith, a customer name, we can replace this with a generic ID, for example, customer, let's suppose 123. So this is a generic, no one can identify John Smith from this customer 123. And another important thing about data anonymization is that this is irreversible. So you cannot trace back customer 123 to John Smith. And once this data is anonymized, this data can then be used for analysis, analytic purposes, and research, etc. For example, university needs some data, some patients' data from hospital for their research. So what the hospital can do, that they can remove the PHI data and replace it with such generic data. And then the university students and professor can use that data for their research, for analysis, analytic, but they cannot trace back that data to any of the patient. So important thing about it is that this process is irreversible. Next is the tokenization. Sorry, it is replacing sensitive data with the unique token while storing the real data securely elsewhere. For example, a cloud app sends a token like token 12345 to represent a credit card number stored safely in a private database. As the name indicates, tokenization, we replace sensitive data such as credit card number with some tokens, but the real credit card number are securely stored in a database. So this one, the tokenization is reversible. How, for example, you may have a table where we have a token, let's suppose token 12345, and this correlates to a specific credit card number. So when needed, we can verify that indeed this token represents this credit card number. So the difference between anonymization and tokenization is, one difference is that it is tokenization is reversible, anonymization is irreversible. Anonymized data is basically used for research and analysis, analytics, while the tokenization data is used in real world scenarios such as in banking for correlating the credit card numbers with tokens. So that's the difference. This slide is very important. You must understand these concepts. So if you understand these, what is the masking, anonymization, tokenization, what's the difference between them, then good enough. In books, you may read multiple pages about these concepts, but sometimes they may confuse you more instead of making these concepts clear. So I hope it is clear. And if you have any question or confusion, you ask in the comments. So our next topic is cloud storage data protection policies. What are some consideration or some security measures that we can apply to data that is stored inside cloud? So the considerations include, first one is the legal and regulatory requirements. Since cloud is a specific infrastructure, specific storage types, unlike traditional uh, infrastructure where we have a data center at a specific location, data resides always over there. In cloud, the data is movable. You may store it in some region, but you may never know that it may be in some other continent or in some other country. So that's why inside cloud, the legal and regulatory requirements is very important to ensure all legal, regulatory, and standard requirements are documented and agreed upon before storing data in the cloud with the CSP, that is Cloud Service Provider. So, for example, verify that cloud storage meets GDPR and HIPAA compliance. What does this mean? This means that, let's suppose in EU GDPR, if you store the EU citizens' data, it must remain within EU boundary. But in cloud, you may never know, the data may be stored, let's suppose, inside China. So you must know, or the cloud provider CSP must comply with the specific policies that applies on your data. For example, if an organization deals with the EU customers' data, then the cloud provider should uh, comply with GDPR policies by storing the data inside EU boundaries. Similarly, HIPAA, if the data belongs to US patients' data, it must reside inside US boundary and all other legal requirements such as its confidentiality. Data mapping is that identify where data resides, the type of data, its formats, and its flow across different systems. In cloud, we have multiple systems, so you must know that how data is mapped across different systems, how data goes from one system to another, whether it resides inside one physical location or it is flows between multiple physical locations. For example, in cloud, we have a cloud AWS, let's suppose region 1 in one location, one physical location, region 2 in other physical location. And for redundancy, the cloud provider may replicate data from one physical location to other. So you must know that how your data flows between these different region and system, so that if your data is sensitive and it has certain rules and regulation to comply with, you know about all these things. So for mapping customer data stored in AWS EU Europe region and track backup location, that if your data resides in EU region, how the backup is taken and where is the backup location, because most of the time the backup location is not the same location. For to you can say that backup is always at some off-site location or at some distant geographic location, so that if this specific region is struck by a natural disaster such as earthquake, tsunami, etc., your data is secure at the remote geographic location. So you must know all these considerations specifically when your data is stored in cloud. Next is the data classification. As we already studied, it categorizes data based on sensitivity, compliance, needs, ownership, and business purpose. So label data as confidential, internal, or public to apply proper control according to its classification. Policy-based procedures, so follow specific handling and retention procedures for each data category according to organizational policy. So apply encryption and limited access for confidential data during retention. So our next topic is data protection policies that apply to data archiving. So archiving is also storage, but it is cold storage, and data, that type of data is archived that is not accessed frequently. So it is archived for legal purposes. Some regulation may require that you must retain certain type of data for specific number of years, for example, 3 years or 5 years. But your organization no longer actively need this data, then that type of data is stored, or you can say archived, but not used or accessed frequently. This type of storage is also known as sometimes as cold storage. So some data archiving consideration includes encryption. So if the data is sensitive, it should be ensured that archived data is protected from unauthorized access. So sensitive data is always recommended to be stored in encrypted form, so that even if it is accessed, it is encrypted and of no use to the one that accesses it. Monitoring means that tracks access integrity of archived data to detect enough. So once data is archived, it should not be the case that you forget the data. It should be regularly monitored, so that if someone accesses it, you know that who accessed the data and why. And similarly, you should also ensure the integrity of archived data, so that it remains intact and is not corrupted. So the integrity anomalies and access anomalies should be monitored. Next is the granular retrieval. It means that you should be able to selectively recover specific files or data portion in the archive data instead of restoring the entire archive. So, for example, if you need some specific files to recover or to access, it should not be the case that you then need to restore the whole archive data that may be very large. You should be able to recover specific files or specific chunks of data. Electronic discovery or e-discovery is the process of finding, securing, and reviewing electronic data for legal or investigative purposes. So once your data is archived, you should be able to search and find specific data inside your archived data. For example, if you need some email data or some, let's suppose, a customer credit card number, there should be a way to electronically search and discover that data. Backup and recovery, so ensures that archived data can be restored if corruption or loss occurs. So if, let's suppose, there is some corruption or loss of data, you should be able that you have a backup of that archived data, and then you are able to recover that archived data from the backup. Media type means that what type of physical or cloud storage medium is used to store that archived data. For example, it may be tab, it may be disk, or it may be cloud storage. Next is the restoration procedure. So this defines a step for recovering archived data efficiently and securely. So our next topic, and an important topic, is data remnants. So data remnants is the residual data left on storage media after deletion or destruction effort. So let's suppose you have a simple example, a flash drive, and let's suppose you have some data over it, and you insert this flash drive inside your laptop. You have Windows laptop, you right click on this flash drive and you simply format it or delete the data. So does this permanently delete the data, or there are ways to retrieve the data through some means? Yes, there are ways to retrieve that data through specific forensic tools, and that concept is known as data remnant. Since although you deleted the data, there are remnants and data available over there that can be retrieved. So for sensitive data, this is very important that you know how to properly remove or destroy the data without any possibility of retrieval. So the risk of data remnants is that improper deletion can allow unauthorized recovery of sensitive or regulated data. Sensitive or regulated data means PHI, patient health information, confidential data, or top secret data. So what are some causes and risk of data remnants? So simply deleting files only removes pointers, not the actual data. Temporary files, caches, CPUs, GPUs, and cryptographic system may retain data traces. Cloud environments complicate data destruction since users lack physical drive access. So inside cloud, you don't have direct access to the hard disk drive, so deleting that data is complicated. We will see how that data can be deleted, what are the procedure to delete data inside cloud so that it cannot be accessed. So the cloud considerations are physical overwriting is not possible in cloud models such as SaaS, software as a service, and PaaS, platform as a service. So the solution is to encrypt the data and delete the encryption keys. And this process is known as cryptographic erasure. When you delete the encryption keys, the data can no longer be decrypted, and so it is erased. The data is erased or deleted cryptographically, known as cryptographic erasure. So next topic is sanitizing media. So these are different types of media, and these are some of the methods which we can use to sanitize the data from these media. And the first type is magnetic tapes or discs, and the approved methods are degaussing. So degaussing, remember, it is important. Degaussing is exposing the disk to very strong magnetic fields, and this method is only used for magnetic tapes and disk. It does not work again optical disks, SSDs, etc. So you should keep this point in mind, that only the magnetic tapes can be purged or can be sanitized using degaussing, which is exposing them to very strong magnetic fields. Next is incinerating, or you can also say burning the disk, crushing the physical disk, magnetic tape, and disintegrating them to small particle of 2 millimeter. Next media type is the optical discs, including CD, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs. And again, the approved methods include incineration, disintegration, and shredding. So always remember, the physical destruction methods are almost always the most secure methods as compared to other methods such as degaussing or overwriting, etc. For SSDs, we can use again the physical method of disintegration or incineration. The smart card can be strip shredded diagonally. So, if they are shredded diagonally, it is more secure, since you can see that these strips are very small, smart card. So, if they are not shredded diagonally, there may be chances that data can be retrieved from the strips if they are, let's suppose, threaded vertically or horizontally. Our last topic is the sanitization techniques according to NIST-SP 80-88, and these techniques include clearing, which is overwriting the media with 0 and 1s, and it gives basic protection. So remember, it is not fully secure method, and it should not be used for very sensitive data. So it gives basic protection. Next is the purging, which is uh, degaussing to erase magnetic data on magnetic disk. Next is the destruction, which is the most secure method, and it is physically or logically destroying data. So mainly it is physically. Logically means to encrypt data and then delete the keys, as we studied in the case of data deletion inside cloud. Next is zeroing or overwriting, which replace data with random bits or zeros. And last one is the cryptographic erasure, which is deleting the encryption keys that renders data unreadable. So that's all for this domain. Thank you for watching. Please post any question inside the comments, and stay tuned for my next video on domain 3.